In 1934, the Japanese Empire decided to build a system error for the United States Navy. They knew they couldn't win a factory war against America. They couldn't build more ships, so they decided to build the One. A ship so massive, so heavily armored, and so powerful that it would render every other warship on the planet obsolete. But to build a monster, you have to live in the shadows. The construction of the Yamato was wrapped in a level of secrecy that bordered on the psychotic. They didn't just build a ship, they built a 75,000 square meter curtain of sisal fiber to hide it from the world. Workers were photographed, background checked by the secret police, and searched daily. And if you lost a blueprint, the investigation didn't start with a reprimand, it started with torture. In 1938, a worker who accidentally misplaced a classified drawing was interrogated with brutal efficiency before being sentenced to 3 years in prison. The Japanese Navy even lied to its own accountants, labeling the ship's massive 18.1-inch guns as 16-inch guns, to ensure that if a spy looked at the books, they'd see a normal ship instead of a 72,000-ton god of war. This is the story of the Yamato, the ghost ship, that the Americans didn't even believe was real until it was too late. The scale of the Yamato is an outlier that breaks the human brain. She was 263 meters long, nearly 3 football fields of floating steel. But the real glitch in the math was the weight. American intelligence estimated the Yamato at around 40,000 tons. They were wrong by an entire city's worth of steel. The Yamato displaced 72,800 tons. To move this mountain through the water at 27 knots, engineers installed 4 steam turbines generating 150,000 shaft horsepower. That is enough energy to power a small city, all contained within a single hull. They used 7.5 million welding rods to fuse the plates together, creating single welded sections that weighed 80 tons each. But the most terrifying engineering outlier was the main battery. The Yamato carried 9 18.1-inch guns. To understand the scale, the turret paradox. A single triple-gun turret on the Yamato weighed 2,510 tons. That is heavier than an entire standard U.S. destroyer. The projectile. Each shell weighed 1,460 kilograms, roughly the same as a 2025 Toyota Corolla. The reach. These guns could hurl that car over the horizon to a distance of 42 kilometers. The Yamato was designed to survive hits from its own guns. The main belt was 16 inches of hardened steel, and the turrets were wrapped in 25 inches of armor. She was an immovable object that carried the world's most irresistible force. Despite being the ultimate weapon, the Yamato suffered from a strategic disorientation. She was completed just 9 days after Pearl Harbor, but she spent the first years of the war doing nothing. Because she was so expensive and consumed so much fuel, the Japanese High Command was terrified of losing her. She became known as Hotel Yamato, a floating palace where officers ate luxury meals while the real war was being fought by aircraft carriers. At the Battle of Midway, the most decisive naval engagement of the war, the Yamato was the flagship. But she never fired a single 18.1-inch shell. The age of the battleship had ended before the Yamato even stepped onto the field. The war was decided by planes 200 miles away, leaving the world's most powerful ship as a 72,000-ton spectator. It wasn't until October 1944, at the Battle of Leyte Gulf, that the Yamato finally unsheathed her sword. She encountered a tiny American force called Taffy 3, a group of small escort carriers and destroyers that had no business fighting a battleship. From $35,000 yards away, the Yamato opened fire. The first salvo was a near miss on the escort carrier White Plains. But with shells this size, a near miss is a catastrophe. The explosion under the keel was so powerful it warped the entire hull, and the White Plains never saw active service again. Then, she targeted the destroyer Johnston. At $20,300 yards, 3 18.1-inch shells slammed into the tiny ship. It was like a professional boxer punching a toddler. The Johnston's speed was cut in half instantly, and the bridge was turned into a charnel house. For a few brief hours, the Yamato was the nightmare the designers had promised. By April 1945, the Japanese Empire was in a terminal dive. They had no fuel, no carriers, and no hope. In a fit of command hubris, the Navy ordered the Yamato on a one-way suicide mission to Okinawa. They gave her just enough fuel to reach the island. The plan was to beach the ship and use her as a stationary fortress. It wasn't a tactical move, it was a psychological sacrifice. American codebreakers saw the ghost coming. Admiral Spruance wanted a classic battleship duel, but the logic of 1945 was different. Instead of ships, the Americans sent 280 aircraft. On April 7th, the Yamato was alone in the East China Sea. No air cover, no escape. The Americans used a systematic destruction strategy. They didn't just drop bombs randomly, they concentrated every torpedo hit on the port side of the ship. They wanted to capsize her. For 2 hours, the Yamato took punishment that would have sunk 10 other ships. She took 11 torpedo hits and dozens of bombs. The crew flooded their own engine rooms on the opposite side to balance the ship, drowning hundreds of their own men just to keep the guns level. At 2:20 p.m., the Yamato rolled over. As she capsized, her $2,500 ton turrets fell out of their mounts, and the fire reached the ammunition magazines. The resulting explosion was so massive, it created a mushroom cloud 20,000 feet high. It could be seen and heard 200 kilometers away in Japan. Of the 3,332 men on board, only 276 survived. The monster of the Pacific had been erased by the very technology Japan had underestimated, the airplane. In 1985, a salvage team found the Yamato 1,100 feet underwater. She was torn in two. The explosion had been so violent that the bow and stern sections lay 200 meters apart. The Yamato is the ultimate outlier of the old world. She was a masterpiece of engineering, built for a war that no longer existed. Japan spent the equivalent of billions of dollars on a ship that was too big to use and too precious to lose. She remains a warning about technical fixation. You can build the biggest gun in the world, you can torture your workers to keep the secret, but if you ignore the systemic shift in how wars are actually won, you are just building a very expensive monument to your own defeat. If the story of the ghost ship and the 20,000-foot mushroom cloud changed how you see naval history, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that the truth behind the secrets deserves to be seen. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We decode the world's most incredible engineering outliers every single week. What do you think? If Japan had built 5 aircraft carriers instead of the Yamato, could they have held the Pacific, or was the outcome inevitable? Let's talk in the comments below. We read every single one.